When I first joined this company, I thought I had found my dream job. A solid firm, excellent pay, a friendly team. I was ready to give my best. My boss was Victor Hansen, a classic corporate leader, tough, ambitious and, as it seemed to me at the time, fair. Over the course of 4 years, I grew up in the company, from a junior analyst to a senior manager. I put everything into my work, I took on the most difficult projects, stayed up late into the night and trained newcomers. My colleagues respected me, and Victor often praised me for my diligence. Everything was going fine, until one day there was a thunderclap. It was an ordinary Monday. I arrived at the office a little earlier than usual, brewed coffee and sat down to do my reports. Suddenly Victor came to my desk, his face stony, his eyes cold. "We need to talk in the conference room," he said without even looking at me. I felt my insides clench. We walked into the room, where 2 of the security team and our CFO, Mark, were already sitting. Victor closed the door and turned sharply to me. "Explain how $50,000 worth of fictitious transactions ended up in your account." I blinked in confusion. What? What transactions? I didn't do anything like that. Victor threw a printout on the table, my login, date, time. The money went into some account I'd never heard of. "Victor, there must be some kind of mistake." "I never." "Dan, that's enough," he interrupted. "We've done an internal audit. All the trails lead back to you. I thought I could trust you." Mark looked at me with pity, and the guards were already at the door. I tried to explain something, but Victor only waved his hand. "You're fired. Pack your things and leave the building." I walked out of the conference room in complete shock. My colleagues looked at me with bewilderment, someone whispered something. I felt a cold sweat running down my body. How come? Why did I have these transactions in my account? I was escorted to my workstation and given a box for my personal belongings. As I was putting away my folders and notepad, Ed, a colleague I often worked with, approached me. "What's going on?" he asked quietly. "I've been fired. Victor says I stole the money." "Bullshit. Everyone knows you're honest." "Maybe it's a mistake." "A mistake or a setup," I breathed out, feeling a lump come up in my throat. Ed shook his head. "This is crazy. There's something Victor's not telling me." When I walked out of the office, the world seemed to fall apart. The career I'd spent so many years building was destroyed in an instant. I didn't know what to do next. I just wanted to get drunk and forget about it. But there was another feeling growing inside me, anger. Anger at Victor for believing some fake documents and not giving me even a chance to justify myself. That evening, I called my wife. Linda was shocked. "What do you mean, fired? Why?" "Victor claims I stole the money. But I have no idea where the transactions came from. We have to fight this, Dan." "That's not true. You couldn't do that." She was right. But how do I prove my innocence if the paperwork's all against me? I sat on the couch in the dark, going over every little detail in my head until I realized. Someone had set me up on purpose. The next day, I decided not to let it go. I called Ed and asked him to meet me. We crossed paths at a coffee shop near the office. Ed brought the printouts of the reports he'd managed to get. "Look," he said, laying the papers on the table. I checked the transaction data. The IP address listed is not from our office at all. It looks like remote access. "So someone spoofed the login?" I asked. "Looks like it." I noticed another oddity: all transactions go through the company's server, but are routed through a different access point. I didn't immediately understand what he was talking about, but the point was clear. Someone had deliberately made the traces lead back to me. Ed looked at me thoughtfully. "You know, I have a suspicion. Victor often locks himself in his office after lunch. He says he's preparing reports, but the strange thing is that he always asks not to be disturbed. Do you think he might be involved?" "I'm not saying, but if someone has access to the logs, it's him." I realize this is an opportunity. I have to get to the bottom of this, or I'm gonna look guilty in everyone's eyes. I lay awake that night trying to think of a plan. I knew one thing: if this was really Victor's work, he must have already noticed my attempts to get to the truth. Not only was my reputation at stake, but my whole life. I dialed Linda and said, "I'm going to prove my innocence. Even if it means stirring up a hornet's nest." "I'm with you," she said firmly. I could feel the anger changing to determination. "I'm not just going to get my job back, I'm going to make Victor answer for his lies." I woke up the next morning with one thought: I wasn't going to let this end so easily. Victor couldn't just write me off after all these years of work. I sensed the truth was somewhere close by, but I had to be careful. Linda made coffee in the morning and sat down across from me in the kitchen. "Did you find out anything from Ed?" she asked. "Yeah. He says the transactions were going through remote access. And Victor's been acting weird lately, locking himself in his office when everyone's out to lunch." "You think he could be setting you up?" "I don't know yet, but I need to find proof." Linda nodded and put her hand on mine. "I know you can handle it. Don't let him destroy everything you've built." I decided that the first order of business was to talk to Ed again. We agreed to meet at his house so as not to attract attention. When I arrived, he was already waiting on the porch, looking around nervously. "You won't believe what I found," he said as we settled into the garage. "Well, come on, spit it out." "I ran a few more of the transactions you allegedly made. They were all done through the same server. But the weird thing is, there are glitches in the logs. They coincide with the time Victor asked us not to go into his office." I squinted. "Are you saying that Victor was running these transactions when he was alone?" "That would seem to be the case. But I need to get into his office and check his computer. Without that, all our guesses are just words." I knew I couldn't just walk into the office. If Victor saw me, he'd call security. I asked Ed to find out when Victor would be out of the office. He promised to let me know. The next day, Ed sent a text message. "Victor left to meet a client. The receptionist has the keys." I wasted no time. I drove up to the building and called the receptionist, pretending I'd forgotten important documents in the office. The old lady Marjorie knew me, so she didn't ask any questions and gave me the spare key to Victor's office. I went inside, trying not to attract attention. Victor's office was in perfect order as always, all the folders laid out, the monitor turned off. I plugged in a flash drive with a program to recover deleted files and ran it on his computer. While the program was running, I looked around and noticed a small folder on the shelf. In it were copies of the financial statements for the last 6 months. I flipped through the pages and suddenly came across something strange. Victor's signature was on one of the documents, but the numbers didn't match the ones I'd seen before. I copied the file to a flash drive. The program on the computer completed the restore, and I found what I was looking for. A folder labeled Report for Audit. Inside were copies of the very transactions that had gotten me fired. But the file creation dates were different from the ones Victor had shown me at the meeting. They were created 3 days earlier than he had stated. I realized that Victor had prepared the setup in advance. I quickly left the office, returned the keys to Marjorie, and hurried home. Linda was already waiting for me, noticing my agitated state. "Did you find something?" she asked. "Yes. I have copies of the transactions and confirmation that the files were created long before the audit. It's a setup." "So he set it up." "That's what it looks like. But I need more proof." The next day, I contacted Ed again. He suggested we dig deeper and check the company's financial statements for the last 6 months. We suspected that Victor hadn't just set me up, but was trying to cover up his fraud. Ed was able to access the internal database and discovered an interesting detail. Over the past few months, the company had seen a dramatic increase in outside consulting expenses. All the transactions went into the same account. "Do you think he was withdrawing money through fake contracts?" I asked. "Very likely. But I need to find out who owns that account. I'll try to run it through my connections." That same night, I decided not to sit idly by. I called a former colleague from the finance department, Tom. We'd always gotten along, and I was hoping he could help. "Tom, are you still working on the reports?" I asked. "Yes, why? Can you check the accounts where the contract money went?" "It's complicated, but I'll try. If we find anything weird, I'll let you know." A couple hours later, Tom called back. Dan, you're not gonna believe this. This account is registered to a shell company, and, Victor is the founder. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My own boss was stealing from the company, and he made me the scapegoat. Now I had almost all the pieces of the puzzle. The next day I got more news from Tom. Victor plans to sue you. He wants to collect the money and prove his case. So he doesn't realize we have proof. That's good. I knew I had to act decisively. Ed and I thought of a plan, to wait until Victor was preparing for the trial and to make all the evidence public, so that the company wouldn't have time to cover up the scandal. I wasn't going to give up. Now that the truth was almost in my hands, I was ready to destroy Victor, even if it took time. This time I was loaded. I knew now that Victor wasn't just trying to get rid of me, he was covering up his machinations. I couldn't let that creep just ruin my life and career. Ed immediately supported the idea of getting Victor out in the open. We realized that the usual evidence might not be enough. Victor was obviously good at covering his tracks. We had to make him wrong. We agreed to use an old trick, create the illusion of safety. If Victor believed that I was resigned to being fired and taking no action, he might relax and make a mistake. Ed informed his colleagues that I had made the decision not to sue and just leave the company. Linda created a fake profile on a professional platform with the name Mark Dixon, corporate finance consultant. I contacted Victor from another number and introduced myself as Mark, offering to help optimize the company's financial flows. A couple days later, Victor replied to the message with interest. I worked out a cover story. I supposedly had connections with the inspection authorities and could help cover my tracks. If he bites, we'll have direct evidence, Ed said. As long as he doesn't realize it's a setup, Linda added. Victor agreed to meet Mark Dixon at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. Linda prepared a laptop with fake documents to make it look professional. I put on my glasses and changed my voice so Victor wouldn't recognize me. When he entered the cafe, I was already sitting at a corner table. Victor sat across from me, a little wince on his face, but no suspicion. "It's nice to meet you, Mark," he said, squeezing my hand. "Likewise. I hear you're having trouble with the audit." Victor shook his head. "It was an unfortunate incident. One of my employees turned out to be a thief." "Really? How did that happen?" "The guy was behaving perfectly, but then it was discovered that he was embezzling money. I had to fire him, and now we're in court." I nodded, trying not to show emotion. "What can I do for you?" "I want to make sure the company doesn't suffer any losses. If the court finds him not guilty, we'll have to reinstate him, pay compensation." I got a flash drive. There's a program on that drive that erases transaction traces. If anyone tries to find the fraud, they'll see a clean report. "Really? Is that possible?" "Yes. But you have to get the program to work from your work computer." While Victor was going through the files, I discreetly turned on my cell phone. I needed to catch him confessing. "What if they want to check the previous month's reports?" Victor asked. "There's an easy way around that. The main thing is to make sure that your previous transactions don't show up. I've already managed to withdraw some money while they were digging through the papers. But these checks," he banged his fist on the table irritably. "If you're found out, it's the end of your career," I added calmly. "I can't afford it." That idiot, Dan, didn't even realize I'd set him up. It was too easy. The words made me clench my fists, but I kept my face impenetrable. "So you used his account?" "Of course I did. I'm not stupid." When he left for lunch, I logged in with his login. It made it look clean. I knew it was exactly what I needed. Victor gave himself away with his guts. I stood up and gave him my hand. "It's a deal. I'll help you." "That's good. It's better to be friends with me than to fight with me," Victor smirked. "Sure. By the way, a small detail." I put the phone on the table with the recording on. "It wasn't Mark Dixon. It was Dan. And you just gave yourself away." Victor's face went pale. He jumped up, trying to grab the phone, but I quickly shoved it into my pocket. You can't prove anything." "I already did. You said yourself on the tape that you set me up. I think the company will be thrilled when they hear how you've been withdrawing money into dummy accounts." Victor looked at me with horror. If you go to the bosses with this, I'll make sure you don't get hired anywhere at all. That's not a problem. I have other plans for you. I left the cafe, feeling anger give way to satisfaction. I knew Victor wouldn't calm down and would try to get away with it, but I had a trump card, the tape. Now I had to get it right. When I got home, I showed the tape to Ed. He was thrilled. It's the bomb. He's not gonna get away with this. We have to be prepared. We have to wait for the moment and go public. I'll get my IT people in here to go through all the logs and transactions. If Victor's been cleaning up, we'll find it. Linda was enthusiastic, too. When everyone finds out the truth, he'll be at the bottom. I want him to feel the same pain and fear I felt, I said firmly. Everything was on the line now. I knew Victor would try to save his own skin. But I was ready. After I received the tape of Victor's confession, I realized it was my ticket to justice. But I had to be smart. I didn't just want to produce the tape, I needed to make Victor destroy himself. Ed understood my plan immediately. If we just hand the tape over to the boss, he'll say it's a fake, he thought. So we'll make him turn himself in, I replied. Linda suggested a plan, to make Victor confess publicly. And to make sure he didn't suspect a trick, we needed to create a stressful situation for him. Ed sent out a letter in the corporate mail on behalf of an anonymous tipster. The company is undergoing a new internal investigation into suspected financial fraud. All documents and logs will be scrutinized. We knew Victor was paranoid and would probably start covering his tracks. We had to make him panic enough to make him make the mistake himself. The next day, Ed reported that Victor had locked himself in his office and wouldn't let anyone in. Colleagues were whispering in the hallways, discussing the letter and the boss's behavior. I knew that Victor would be looking for a way to justify himself to the management, so Linda came up with the idea of creating another fake account on a platform for financiers. This time we posed as the company's auditor and sent an email to Victor's private email account. An unscheduled audit is scheduled for next week. If fraud is detected, legal proceedings will be held. The reply came a couple hours later. Could you please let me know who initiated the inspection? I'm willing to cooperate. Now he was hooked. Victor was nervous and trying to get some information to prepare himself. We knew Victor would try to gather dirt on me to justify himself to his superiors. I decided to play it safe. I sent him a text message from an alien number. I have information on Dan's case. $5000 for details. As expected, Victor took the bait. We arranged to meet in a parking lot outside the office. Linda set up cameras on the hood of the car to record the conversation. When Victor pulled up, I was already waiting for him in the shadows. What are you doing here? He muttered as he got out of the car. I was told you had an interest in Dan's case. And who are you? Do you want information or not? I tried to keep my voice even. Victor fidgeted, then pulled out an envelope of money. What do you got? Information that you did all the fraud yourself, framing Dan. He turned pale. That's bullshit. I'm just trying to protect the company. I smirked. So you're confessing? Do you have any idea who you're talking to? He hissed, clenching his fists. I fired that pathetic loser because he was too smart. Figured he could get into my business. That's what I got. I could feel the anger rising inside, but I stayed calm. So you set him up to cover up your own fraud? Yes. Because that idiot started to suspect something. I'd rather let one go than have my whole career go to hell. I turned on the recording on my phone and showed Victor the video. He froze, realizing he'd just given himself away. You recorded the whole thing? Aha. And it's not the first time you've confessed. He tried to snatch the phone, but I dodged it and took a step back. I'm sending this to the whole company. Plus your transactions and your phone records. You're not doing this. Victor was trying to calm down. Let's make a deal. I'll give you your job back, raise your salary. We'll forget the whole thing. It's too late, Victor. You're out of line. I went out to the parking lot and got in touch with Ed right away. We got everything. We're going to a meeting tomorrow. It's gonna be a show. I'll let the guys know. It's going to be epic, Ed replied cheerfully. The next day Victor had no idea what was waiting for him. He was sitting in the hall with an important look when I walked in with Linda and Ed. The bosses were there, too. Ed had arranged an emergency meeting at my request. When everyone was assembled, I fired up the projector and turned on the tape of my conversation with Victor. On the screen Victor was frankly telling me how he had set me up and was withdrawing money through fake contracts. The room froze. Victor turned pale, jumped up from his seat. It's a lie. It's a fake. But Ed raised his hand. I've checked all the transactions. All traces lead back to your account, Victor. Plus, the flash drive you left in your office has documents with your name on it. The superiors demanded explanations from Victor, but he only mumbled something inaudible, realizing that he was cornered. After an hour, the guards took him out. The bosses apologized to me and offered to give me back my position with a promotion. I nodded, but all I felt in my heart was bitterness. The next morning I got a text from Linda. Victor has been arrested. The DA's office is already pursuing a fraud case. I stood on the porch and watched the sunrise. It was over. I had proven my innocence, but there was no pride in victory. I had just done what I had to do. But when my colleague sent the video of Victor being led out in handcuffs, I couldn't hold back a smile. You destroyed yourself, Victor. Fair enough. After Victor was arrested, life slowly started to get better. Colleagues began to write me messages congratulating me, my superiors apologized publicly, and the CFO, Mark, personally called and offered to give me my position back with a promotion. Frankly, I expected satisfaction. After all, I had won, I had exposed a scoundrel, I had regained my honorable name. But instead of joy I felt only emptiness. So many nerves, so much fear and sleepless nights, all this did not pass as quickly as I would like. First day back at work after the win. When I walked into the office, my coworkers applauded. Ed clapped me on the shoulder and smiled broadly. You did it, bro. We knew you couldn't have stolen the money. Thanks, Ed, couldn't have done it without you. Linda was there for me too, supporting me every step of the way. I finally felt like I was starting to get my life back together. But even after Victor's revelation, there was still something unsettling. In the corridors they were still discussing the scandal, and I noticed how some colleagues still looked at me with suspicion. The paranoia remained even after the triumph. A week later I learned that the prosecutor's office had launched a serious investigation against Victor. It turned out he'd been stealing money from the company for years. He had been forging contracts, transferring funds to front companies, and then covering his tracks by framing his employees. When I heard about the other victims, I was even sadder. One of the people fired because of Victor's schemes, Mike, contacted me. I always said it wasn't my fault. But they wouldn't even listen to me, he said bitterly. Now the truth is on your side. Victor won't frame anyone else, I tried to comfort him. Yes, but my career is ruined. And I can't get it back. I wondered how many people had gotten hurt because of that bastard. But I knew one thing, now he'd feel what it was like to lose everything. There were rumors at work that Victor had made a deal with the prosecutors. Allegedly, he'd give up information about the company's bigger frauds to mitigate his punishment. I was afraid he might make it look like I was involved. One night, I got a letter in my private email. Dan, don't get excited ahead of time. I'll be back. I felt my heart clench. This creep wasn't going to give up, even from behind bars. I immediately showed the letter to Ed and Linda. He's just trying to scare me, Ed said. But what if he's telling the truth? What if he's exonerated? Linda whispered. We decided to make one last move. Ed remembered that Victor often used his personal laptop at work when he was preparing reports. I contacted the company lawyer and suggested we check his device. If we found any evidence of fraud, Victor would not be able to get away with it, I said. A couple of days later, the lawyer informed me that they had found a whole folder with copies of fictitious contracts and transaction logs on Victor's personal laptop. That was the final link. Victor now faced several years in prison. A week later, the court handed down the sentence. Victor Hansen was found guilty of fraud and falsifying financial documents. The penalty, 5 years in prison and a $200,000 fine. I heard it on the news, and for the first time in a while, I was relieved. Things had finally settled down at work. Colleagues stopped staring, my bosses apologized again and offered to participate in a project to improve the company's security system. I agreed, now I knew how important it was to keep an eye on such things. Linda supported my decision, and together we decided to take a little vacation, to go to the countryside and just forget about this nightmare. One evening I was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee when I got a call from Ed. "There's news, Victor's trying to appeal." Not surprising, I grinned. "But he doesn't stand a chance." "Yeah, with that kind of evidence, he won't get out for 5 years. You know, Ed, I'm glad this is over." "Me too. You deserved to win." I hung up the phone and breathed in the cool air. It was over. There was no more fear and anger, just the feeling that the truth had triumphed. 6 months later, I was promoted to head the finance department. The company's reputation was restored, and Victor's name became synonymous with disgrace. One day I saw the news. Former company manager Victor Hansen has filed a new petition for release. I closed the article with a smile. "You won't ruin any more lives. I promise that." Linda came out onto the porch and put her arm around my shoulders. "It's finally all in the past," she said. "Yes, and I'm glad I didn't give up. I knew now that sometimes the truth can seem weaker than a lie. But if you fight to the end, justice wins. Revenge is not when you destroy your enemy. Revenge is when the enemy destroys himself."